Hi and welcome to our new YouTube tutorial. In this video we're going to be building a simple landing page with a CSS Grid Menu. The project will be built based on three technologies. We will use HTML, CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. As a tool for the layout I'm going to use CSS Grid. Recently we have uploaded the crash course about CSS Grid, so if you need to get familiar with this layout module, then first you can watch this tutorial and after that build the menu. Also we have crash courses about HTML and JavaScript, so you can watch them as well. The links will be down below in the description. Besides the CSS Grid, we will also use a couple of CSS Flexbox properties. Alright, let's go ahead and first describe the project. It consists of two main parts. The first one is going to be a simple landing page. I didn't put here lots of elements because the main focus of the project will be CSS Grid layout. We have here the banner with some text and the full screen background image. At the top left corner there is placed a menu icon. If I click it, those lines will move to the right side in order and the grid menu will appear with some nice effects. We have here a couple of menu items aligned nicely. Also at the top left corner we see the X closing button. If I click it, then the menu will close. Okay, so the project is going to be responsive to different screen sizes. If I inspect the page and check it on smaller screen sizes, you will see that it's responsive and looks good. One thing to note here, we're going to use the desktop first approach. We'll build the project for a larger screen size. I mean the screen size with the width of 1920 pixels and the height of 1080 pixels. If you're going to use this smaller screen size during building this project, then it might not look good, but don't worry, at the end of the day we will make it responsive to different screen sizes. In the meantime, you can use developer tools, I mean the responsive mode, and specify the width as 1920 pixels and the height as 1080 pixels. Okay, so I think we are ready to go. I have created a new folder on the desktop called CSS Grid Menu, in which you can find another folder for the images. You can download the source files from the link in the description. I'm going to open this folder in VS Code and then let's go ahead and create three different files for HTML. I'm going to call it index.html. Then we need style.css and the file for JavaScript, script.js. Alright, after that let's go ahead and create the basic HTML document in the index.html file. For that I'm going to use emmet. We need to place an exclamation mark and then press enter or tab. So here we go. Let's go ahead and change the title. I'm going to put here CSS Grid Menu. Then I'm going to create links for the CSS and JavaScript files. Let's open link tag and specify here the path of the file. We need the name of the file, style.css. As for the JavaScript file, I'm going to open script tag and then in source attribute let's specify the name of the file. Alright, so all three files are connected. Next I'm going to bring in a couple of Google fonts. Throughout this tutorial we're going to use two different fonts. Let's go ahead and visit the Google Fonts website. I'm going to type here Google Fonts. So here is the website of Google Fonts. I'm going to search for dancing script. So here it is. After that, let's search for Josephine Slab. I'm going to customize this font because we will use this font with different font weight. So let's check here. A couple of boxes. Okay, finally let's grab the link and paste it in the head element. Alright, so we are almost ready to start coding. Lastly, I want to run the project to the browser. For that, let's use one of the VS Code packages called Live Server. It allows us to run the project live to the browser and make updates without refreshing the page each time. So I recommend to install and use this package. Okay, let's place the editor and the browser like so and get started. So at first I'm going to create the HTML markup for the entire project, and then we will start to write CSS and JavaScript. Let's go ahead and create the markup for the first part of the project, which is going to be the landing. Let's open div tag. It will wrap the entire content of the project. I'm going to give it class container. Then inside the container, I'm going to insert the Hamburger Menu icon. It will be built using the div elements. So let's open div element and assign to it class Hamburger Menu. So the menu icon will consist of two parts. The first one is going to be the hamburger icon. As for the second part, it's going to be the X closing button. So first of all, let's open a div element with class lines. It will wrap all three lines, the first part of the icon. So let's insert here three div elements with a couple of classes. Line and line 1. Then I'm going to duplicate this line of code twice and change the class names. We need line 2 and line 3. Next, I'm going to open another div, which will be a wrapper of the X closing buttons lines. I'm going to give it a class XBTN. After that, let's insert here div element with classes xline and xline1. Then duplicate it and change the class name. Alright, so that's it about the Hamburger menu. Next, I'm going to take care of the header. Let's open it and assign to it class header. Next, we need the banner. So let's insert here a new div element with the class banner. So the banner will consist of two different elements. The first one is going to be the heading. As for the second one, it should be the paragraph. At first, let's insert here h1 and insert here some text. This is a landing page. Next, we need a paragraph with the text with a... Actually, I'm going to insert here the text with a CSS Grid Menu, but I want to use some different styles for the CSS Grid. Therefore, let's wrap those two words with span elements. And then write menu. Alright, that's it about the first part of the markup. Let's go ahead and create the navigation menu. I'm going to open the nav element. Let's assign to it class navigation. So the navigation menu will be represented by a list. I'm going to give it a class nav menu. So in that list element, I'm going to put a couple of list items. Let's open li element. It should have class nav menu item. Then the list item will include a link element with the class nav menu link. So as the first navigation item, I'm going to insert here home. Overall, we'll have 11 items. Therefore, I'm going to duplicate li element 10 times, and then I'm going to change quickly the items. The second one is going to be about. Then we will have projects, blog. Next one is going to be gallery. Also, we will have portfolio, pricing, then events, customers. Next one will be offers. And lastly, I'm going to put here contact. Okay, so that's it about the HTML markup. All the elements are created and now we are ready to start to style them. Let's go to the style.css file. First of all, I'm going to create some reset styles. I want to get rid of the default margin and padding from every element. In order to select every element, we need to use an asterisk. And then to get rid of the default margin and padding, I'm going to set both of them to 0. Alright, so throughout this tutorial I'm going to use rem as the measurement unit. By default, 1 rem equals to 16 pixels because the font size of the HTML element equals to 16 pixels. I want to convert 1 rem into 10 pixels because I think it would be more convenient to use and calculate. So we have to decrease the font size of the HTML element and we have to make it 62.5%. In this case, 1 rem should be equal to 10 pixels. So right now the size of the elements have decreased and they became smaller. Alright, let's go ahead and take care of the header. I want it to take up the entire viewport, so let's select it and define its width and height in the following way. I'm going to make width 100%. As for the height, I'm going to make it 100 viewport height. It means that it takes up 100% of the entire viewport. After that, let's set the image as the full screen background. First of all, I'm going to use linear gradient and I'm going to put here 3 different RGBA values. The first one is going to be 8, 84, 170 and 0.7, the opacity. Next, I'm going to use 18, 87, 190 and opacity 0.5. As for the third color, let's use here black color. We need 0 3 times and opacity 0.2. After that, let's specify the URL, I mean the path of the image. We have a folder called images and we need to select bg.jpg. Next we need center and also no repeat. And finally, let's make the background size cover. Okay, so the background is ready for the header and next comes the banner. I want to place it in the center of the landing. For that we can use a couple of ways, but for me the best one is Flexbox. We need to assign a couple of Flexbox properties to the header element. The first one is going to be display flex because we need to make header flex container. Next we have to change the direction. We need to make it column. And then in order to center the items inside the container, we need justify content center and also align items center. Alright, so the banner is centered. Now we need to customize the heading and the paragraph. Let's go ahead and start with the heading. Let's select it. First of all, I'm going to change the font family. Let's use here one of the Google fonts, Dancing Script. Next we need cursive. Then I'm going to increase the font size. Let's make it 8 rem. Also change the font weight. Make it 400. After that, I'm going to change the color. Let's make it EEE. Create some space between the letters using letter spacing. 0.5 rem. Besides that, I'm going to create some space at the bottom of the element using margin bottom 3 rem. And finally, let's use text shadow with the values 0, 0.2 rem, 0.4 rem, and the black color RGBA 3 zeros and the opacity 0.3. Alright, so the heading looks pretty good. Let's move on to the paragraph. Let's go ahead and select this element. I'm going to make its font family, again, Dancing Script, cursive. Next, increase the font size, make it 4 rem. Also change the color, make it EEE. I'm going to create space between the letters, but in this case let's make it 0.2 rem. And finally, use again text shadow. Actually, I'm going to grab this line of code from here and paste it for the paragraph. Alright, next I want to place the paragraph on the right side. For that, we can use text align right. Okay, as you remember, we have wrapped the words CSS Grid with a span element because we need kind of different style for those two words. So let's go ahead and apply it. I'm going to select span element. Let's set the font family to Josephine Slab serif. Then increase the font size, make it 5 rem. Change the font weight, make it 700. And finally, transform text into uppercase. Alright, so finally we're done with the paragraph, and actually we have finished working on the banner. Next, it's time to customize the menu icon. I'm in the first part of it, which consists of 3 white lines. So let's go ahead and select the wrapper development, which has class Hamburger Menu. First of all, I'm going to make it visible, so we need to define width and height. Let's make both of them 3.5 rem. And also I'm going to assign to it a temporary background color. Let's make it red. Right now the icon is placed at the top left corner of the landing. This is not quite a correct position, so let's define the position of the icon and make it fixed. And also I'm going to specify the top and left positions. I'm going to make both of them 3.5 rem. Alright, so right now the icon is positioned correctly. Lastly, I want to change the type of the cursor and make it pointer. Okay, so next I'm going to display the lines. First of all, let's select their wrapper development, which has the class name lines, and give it a couple of styles. I'm going to set width and height, both of them to 100%. In this case, the element will inherit the width and height of its parent element. I'm in the Hamburger menu. And now let's take care of the lines. Select them with the common class name line. I'm going to set width as 100%. As for the height, let's make it 0.4 rem. Also change the background color, make it white. And also I'm going to make the corners of the lines slightly rounded. For that, let's use border radius with the value 0.2 rem. Alright, so now the lines are visible, but as you guessed, we need to take care of their positions. For that, I'm going to use again flexbox. So let's assign to the lines display flex. Next, we need to change the direction. I'm going to make it column. Next, we have to create some space between the lines, and for that we need to use justify content with the value space evenly. And finally, we need align items center. Okay, so right now the lines are positioned correctly. If we get rid of the red background, you will see them better. Alright, actually with the first part of the project we are done. The header is styled, it looks pretty nice. And now we have to move on to the navigation. I'm going to design the navigation menu, and then after that I will make it work. So in order to proceed, I'm going to hide the header for a while and the lines, and then start to work on the navigation. So let's go ahead and assign to the header and the lines display none. Alright, so here we have just the navigation list. Let's go ahead and start to customize the navigation. I'm going to select the nav element. First of all, let's set its width and height, both of them to 100%. And I'm going to change the background color. Let's use here color D. So right now the navigation starts from the top left corner. It happens because the header is hidden for a while. So I want to define the current position manually as well. For that we need position absolute. And then set top and left properties, both of them to 0. Okay, so now the navigation takes up the entire width and height of the page. I think it's time to customize the items a little bit. First of all, let's select the li element and get rid of the default bullets. Right now those bullets are not visible because we set the padding to 0. Actually, if I turn it on back, then you will see the bullets. Okay, let's get rid of them. I'm going to select li elements and let's assign to it list style none. Next, I'm going to select the link element. First of all, let's get rid of the default underline using text decoration none. Then I'm going to set font family to Josephine Slab serif. Also increase the font size, make it 2.5 rem. Then change the font weight. I'm going to make it slightly bolder, use 700. Then transform text into uppercase. And after that, I'm going to create some space between the letters. Let's make it 0.2 rem. Okay, so the items look much better, but I'm going to add to them some more styles. Let's change the background color. In this case, I'm going to use color 225 C7. Then let's make the text white. And also make the corners of the elements rounded using border radius with the value 0.5 rem. Alright, so that's it for now regarding the link elements. Next we have to start to use the CSS Grid. Actually, I'm going to run the project to the Mozilla Firefox because right now it has the best developer tools for CSS Grid. I mean, it's much easier to work in the Mozilla Firefox when you deal with the CSS Grid layout. If you don't have the Mozilla Firefox, then I recommend to download and install it. Okay, let's grab the URL, then open the browser and paste it here. So we have here our project up and running. I'm going to inspect the page. So you see here the developer tools. It's kind of similar to the Google Chrome's developer tools, but you will see some differences when we start to use the CSS Grid. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to make the nav element grid container. For that, we have to assign to it display grid. Next, we have to define the columns and rows. In the case of the nav element, we are going to have 3 columns and 3 rows. So we need to use grid template columns. So the first column size should be 2 rem. Then we need 1 fractional unit, and then again 2 rem. As for the rows, as we said, we need 3 of them. The size of the first row should be 10 rem. Then again 1 fractional unit, and then 2 rem. Okay, so we have defined the columns and the rows, and in order to see them better, I'm going to check here this little box, and also I'm going to display the line numbers. So here we go. Now our grid is visible. Unfortunately, in Google Chrome right now we don't have such an opportunity. Alright, let me explain what those columns and rows mean. Those little columns will be the space. Then in the first row there's going to be the X closing button. As for the menu itself, it's going to be placed here in the middle. Okay, let's go ahead and define the position of the nav menu. Let's select it. And then define grid column with the line numbers 2 and 3. And grid row with the line numbers 2 and 3 again. As you see, the menu is placed correctly in the second column, and now it's time to place the items. For that, first of all, we have to make the nav menu a grid container. We need display grid. And after that, we have to define the columns and the rows. So let's use grid template columns. Overall, I'm going to create 12 columns. Let's use repeat function. Then specify the number of the columns, 12, and the size, 1 fractional unit. After that, let's define grid template rows. Use repeat function. We will have 4 rows, each of them equal to 1 fractional unit. And besides that, I'm going to create also the space between the grid cells using grid gap equal to 2 rem. Alright, so first of all, let's display the grid lines of the nav menu. As you see, we have 12 columns and 4 rows. Right now the layout is a little bit messed up, but we will take care of that soon. Before we start to position the individual items, I want to use again Flexbox. Using a couple of Flexbox properties, we will make the items stretched in the cells, and also the content of each item will be centered. So we have to use display flex. Then justify content center. Also we need align item center. And I'm going to make height equal to 100%. Okay, so now the items look better and it's time to position them separately. In order to select it, I'm going to use the nth child selector. So we need nav menu item followed by the nth child selector, and we have to specify here the number of the item, 1. So the first item should be placed in the first 2 rows and it should take up the first 3 columns. So we need grid column with the line numbers 1 and 4 and grid row with the line numbers 1 and 3. Okay, so the first item is positioned. Let's move on to the second one. Actually, I'm going to copy this code and then change the number. We need 2. So the second item is going to be placed in the first 2 rows. As for the columns, it's going to be placed between 4th and 7th line numbers. So we need grid column 4 and 7 and grid row with the line numbers 1 and 3. So let's leave it as it is. That's it about the second item. Let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which is going to be 3. So the third item will be positioned in the first row. As for the columns, it's going to be placed from the 7th line number all the way to the end of the grid container. So we need grid column with the line numbers 7 and -1. As for the grid row, it's going to be 1 and 2. So as you see, the third item is placed correctly as well. Next comes the fourth item. I'm going to place it in the second row and it will take up 2 columns. The columns between the 7th and the 9th line numbers. So we need grid column 7, 9. As for the grid row, it's going to be 2 and 3. Alright, next we have the fifth item. It's going to be placed in the second row. As for the columns, I'm going to place it between the 9th and the 11th line numbers. So let's change here the values. We need here grid column 9, 11 and grid row 2 and 3. Okay, so step by step we are moving forward and creating the grid layout. Let's move on to the next item, which is going to be the sixth one. So it should be placed again in the second row. As for the columns, it will take up 2 columns at the end of the grid container. So we need grid column with the line numbers 11 and -1, and grid row again with line numbers 2 and 3. Alright, that's it about the sixth item. Next comes the seventh one. So the seventh item is going to be placed in the third row, and it will take up 6 columns from the beginning of the grid container. So we need grid column with the line numbers 1 and 7. As for the grid row, it should be 3 and 4. Okay, so that's it about the seventh item. Let's move on to the next one, which is eighth item. So it will be placed again in the third row. As for the columns, I want to place it from the line number 7 all the way to the end of the container. So we need grid column with the line number 7 -1 and grid row 3 -1. Okay, so there are left only 3 items. Let's go ahead and define their positions quickly. I know that this process is a little bit boring, but that's the way how CSS Grid works. Let's move on to the ninth item. So the ninth item is going to be placed in the last row, I mean the fourth one. As for the columns, I'm going to place it between the first and third line numbers, so that it will take up the first 2 columns. So we need grid column 1 and 3. As for the grid row, we need 4 and -1. Alright, next we have the 10th item. It's going to be placed again in the 4th row, and it should take up 2 columns from the line number 3 to the line number 5. So we need grid column 3 and 5, and grid row again 4 and -1. Alright, finally it's the last item's turn. I'm going to place it in the last row as well. As for the columns, it's going to be placed between the line number 5 and line number 7. So we need grid column 5 and 7, and grid row again 4 and -1. Alright, so that's it about the navigation menu. It is positioned nicely, it looks pretty good, and now it's time to move on and take care of the other things. I think we can switch back to Google Chrome because we no longer need the help of the grid line numbers. So once we are done with the layout of the navigation menu, I'm going to move on and take care of the X closing button. First of all, let's display the lines. For that we need to select X line. Let's define width and height. I'm going to set width to 3.5 rem. As for the height, let's make it 0.4 rem. Then change the background color. Let's use here color 307BDF. And also I'm going to use border radius with value 0.2 rem. So right now the lines are not visible because they ended up behind the navigation. In order to display them, we have to use one of the CSS properties called zIndex, and we have to assign it to the Hamburger menu itself because the X button is the part of it. So let's set zIndex to, let's say, 100. So as you can see, the lines are displayed. Right now they don't have the shape of X, and we have to take care of that. So in order to make them look like X, I'm going to use CSS transforms. I'm in the rotate and translate functions. So let's go ahead and select X line 1, then use transform with the rotate function. I'm going to rotate line by -45 degrees. Then let's duplicate this code, change the class name, we need xline2, and also get rid of the minus sign from here. Okay, so right now we don't have the perfect x. We need to use translate function. Additionally, it allows us to move the element either horizontally or vertically according to the x and y axis. So in this case, we need translate y with the value 0.3 rem. As for the second line, we need again translate y, but with negative 0.3 rem. So now we have the perfect x. The only thing that I'm going to do is to move the button slightly down. We can do that using a couple of different ways. In this case, I'm going to use positions. I want to center it perfectly inside of the Hamburger menu. So let's go ahead and select xbtn. Then define its position absolute. Set top and left properties, both of them to 50%. And then use transform, translate, minus 50%, and then again minus 50%. Actually, this technique is used to center the element inside the container perfectly. Alright, so that's it regarding the X closing button. Now it's time to make the Hamburger menu work. First of all, I'm going to display back the landing and hide the navigation menu. So let's go ahead and get rid of display none from here. Also, I'm going to display the menu icon. Then let's go ahead and hide the navigation. In this case, I'm going to do that using opacity with value 0 and visibility hidden. Besides that, we need the same properties for the X button as well, because we have to hide it. So let's use them for xbtn. Alright, so everything is ready to make the Hamburger menu work. The first thing that we have to do is to create the click event. For that, I'm going to use JavaScript. Let's open the script.js file and then select the Hamburger menu. I'm going to do that using query selector method. We have to attach it to the document, and then inside the parentheses we have to specify the class name, in this case Hamburger menu. Next, we have to attach to it an event listener. For that, we have to use a method called addEventListener. It takes two arguments. The first one is going to be the type of the event. As we said, we're going to use click event, so let's pass it here. As for the second argument, it should be the function, which then will be executed once we click the element. In this case, I'm going to use an arrow function. Alright, so now we have to pass here the block of code which we need to be executed once we click the icons and the event fires. Let me explain what we're going to do. I'm going to create a new class in CSS called change. We will add this class to the container on click. To be more precise, we will use the toggle method, which means that we will add the class to the container if it doesn't have it, and will remove the class if the container does have it. The toggle method will allow us to avoid using two different methods, add and remove. You may ask, why do we add the class to the container and not the Hamburger menu? The reason is that once the container has the class, we will be able to use it for all its descendants. Alright, let's go ahead and select the container. I'm going to use again query selector method. Then specify here class name container. Next, I'm going to use one of the properties called class list. It actually gives us all the classes the element has. After that, we have to add to this property the toggle method. And inside the parentheses, let's specify the class name which we're going to create, change. Okay, so that's it regarding the JavaScript. Now we have to create the class change in the CSS file. So once we click the icon, we have to hide the header, display the navigation, and also display the X closing button. As for the lines of the menu icon, I'm not going to hide them simply because we will create kind of different effect. Alright, so let's hide the header. We need class change followed by the class header. So if this selection is valid, then we need to apply the following styles. We need opacity 0 and visibility hidden. Next, let's display the navigation. Use again change with navigation. And in this case, we need opacity with the value 1 and visibility visible. Besides that, we have to display the X button as well. So let's use change followed by the X btn class and use here opacity 1 and visibility visible. Alright, so if I click the icon, then the header will hide and the nav menu and the X button will appear. Everything works fine so far. Now I'm going to add some nice effects to our project. I want to hide the header and display the navigation with some fade effects. We will create them using CSS transitions. So I'm going to assign to the header transition with the values all and 0.5 second, which is a duration. We need the same for the navigation, but we have to use the transition property with the class change. So if I click the icon, then the navigation will display with a fade effect, and the same will happen on the next click. The landing will appear with fade. Alright, next I'm going to take care of the navigation items. Let's take a look at the finished project. As you see, the items appear from left to right. So we have to move and place them on the left side, and then we need to move the items to the right side on click. So I'm going to use transform with the translate function. In this case, we need translate X because we have to move the items according to the X axis. Let's insert here minus 100%. So right now the layout has messed up, but that's not the problem because by default we will hide the items. For that I'm going to use one of the CSS properties called overflow hidden, and we have to assign it to the li element. As you see, the items are not completely hidden. We see the edges of them. Let's increase the value of the translate function. I'm going to make it 105%. Alright, now it's better. So we need to display the items once we click the menu icon, but in order to make this effect nicer, we have to define some delay times as well. So to display back the navigation items, we need class change followed by the link, nav menu link. Then we need transform with the translate X function, and in this case we have to pass here 0. Besides that, I'm going to use transition, transform, then the duration 0.7 seconds and delay time 1 second. Alright, so as you see, we have here nice, cool effects. For now, everything works quite well. Now I'm going to take care of the icons, the menu icon on the landing and the X closing button. So what I'm going to do is that I will move the lines of the icon from left to right in order, starting with the top one. So to do that, I'm going to use again transform with translate function and then transitions. So we have to use class change followed by the class line. Then we need transform, again translate X function, and I'm going to pass here 120%. Okay, now we need transition for all 3 lines separately because we have to assign to them different delay time. Let's start with line 1. Use transition, transform with the duration 0.5 second and with the delay time 0.1 second. Let's duplicate it twice, then change the class names and also the delay times. We need 0.3 second for the second line and 0.5 second for the third line. Alright, if I click the icon, then the lines will move from left to right in order, but actually that's not what we want. I want to keep the landing displaying until the lines finish to move. So we need to use some delay time for the header and the navigation as well. For the header, I'm going to use 0.7 second. As for the navigation, let's use the same amount of time. Now, as you can see, the problem is fixed. Okay, and that's fine, but we have to take care of other things as well. We need to hide the lines once they move to the right side. For that, let's go ahead and use overflow hidden. Alright, that's it about the menu icon. Let's move on and work on the X closing button. We need to use transitions with this element as well. So we need here transition all 0.5 seconds. And then we have to use transition with class change, because we have to specify here the delay time 1.3 seconds. So if I click the icon, then everything will work perfectly. So we can say that we have finished building our project, everything looks good, and the only thing that we have to do is to make the project responsive to different screen sizes. Throughout this part of the tutorial, we will be using CSS media queries. Let's go ahead and inspect the page and turn on the responsive mode. So as we already said, the project is built on larger screen size. I mean the screen size with the width of 1920 pixels and the height of 1080 pixels. Let's go ahead and find the first breakpoint. I mean the screen size on which we need to make some changes. I think we have to work on 1300 pixels. So let's go ahead and create a CSS media query with the max width of 1300 pixels. So on that screen size, I'm going to change the entire grid layout. So let's go ahead and select the nav menu. Then define grid template columns. In this case, I'm going to create 6 columns. So use repeat function and specify the number of columns, 6, and the size, 1 fractional unit. Then we need to take care of the rows. I'm going to create 6 rows as well. So let's use repeat function with value 6 and 1 fractional unit. So right now the layout is messed up. That's obvious. So let's go ahead and fix that. We need to define grid line numbers for all the items again. And actually I'm going to copy this code. Then let's paste here. And then quickly comment the line numbers out. After that, let's take a look at the finished version of the project. Let's inspect the page and switch the responsive mode and decrease the width of the window. So that is what we want to get in our working project version. I'm going to start with the first item. So I'm going to change the line numbers for grid column as 1 and 4. As for the grid row, we need 1, 2. So that's the way how the first item looks like. Let's go ahead and change the line numbers for the rest of the items. For the second one, we need grid column 4 minus 1 and grid row 1 and 2. For the third item, I'm going to set grid column to 1 minus 1 and grid row to 2 and 3. Actually, throughout the process of changing the line numbers, we may get some unexpected results, so please bear with me. At the end of the day, we will get the needed result. Next, we have fourth item. We need grid column with the line numbers 1 and 3, and grid row 3 and 4. Then we have fifth item. Let's make its grid column 3 and 5, and grid row 3 and 4. Then we have sixth item. It should have grid column with the line numbers 5 and -1. As for the grid row, we need again 3 and 4. Alright, next comes seventh item. We need grid column with the line numbers 1 and -1, and grid row 4 and 5. In case of the eighth item, we need the same line numbers for grid column. As for the grid row, it's going to be 6 and -1. Then we have ninth item. It should have grid column with the line numbers 1 and 3, and grid row 5 and 6. Alright, so there are two items left only, 10th and the 11th. Let's make grid column for 10th item 3 and 5. As for the grid row, we need 5 and 6. And for the last 11th item, we need grid column equal to 5 and -1, and grid row 5 and 6. Alright, so as you can see, everything looks quite nice, and actually we're done on the breakpoint. Let's go ahead and find the next one. I think we have to make some changes on 800 pixels. So let's go ahead and create new media and specify the max width as 800 pixels. Actually, I'm not going to make here lots of changes because I think we just need to decrease the font size of the HTML element and everything will look nice. Right now, the font size of the HTML element equals to 62.5%, and I'm going to make it 50%. Alright, that's it on 800 pixels. Let's move on and find the next breakpoint. I think it's going to be 650 pixels. So let's go ahead and duplicate this code, change the max width, make it 650 pixels, and also decrease the font size of the HTML element, make it 40%. Okay, let's move on to the next breakpoint. It's going to be, I think, 550 pixels. So let's create new media and specify the max width as 550 pixels. So first of all, I'm going to decrease again the font size of the HTML element. Let's make it 35%. And besides that, I'm going to add here a couple of styles. I think we should decrease the width of banner. Let's make it 80%. And also we need to align heading and paragraph in the center. So let's select both of them and assign to them text align center. Alright, I think everything looks good, and now it's time to work on the last breakpoint, which is going to be about 450 pixels. So let's create new media with the max width 450 pixels. First of all, let's decrease the font size of the HTML element. I'm going to make it 30%. And also I'm going to increase the width of banner slightly. Let's make it 90%. Alright, I think that's it. Finally, we are done with this project. It looks nice and it's responsive to different screen sizes. Okay, so I hope it was interesting and helpful and you learned some new stuff. If you like this video, then please thumbs up, comment below, share it, subscribe to our channel and click the bell to get notified on coming tutorials. Okay, see you next time.